Welcome to the NBA Trades Podcast. I'm your host, Raphael, and today I have a really special guest on trade deadline day / night / whatever. It's the bro, Anthony. Anthony, what's up?
It's deadline day. Shout out to Stu Gatz for that. For deadline day. It's such a wild couple hours we just been through. With everything, like, it was really quiet at first, and then you think about the morning when Woj hit us with that tweet. Well, everybody's trying to move into the buyout market, and not a lot of teams want to do stuff. And then Cleveland just hit us with bam, 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 all in succession.
Well, I think that's the crazy thing is that the Lakers and Nets news, he sort of said the Lakers and Cavs. The Lakers and Cavs are discussing a trade, and I was just like, who could it be? Who's going where? And it really came out of nowhere, and I was excited to see what happened. And obviously, when I saw Isaiah Thomas's name on the report, on the tweet, I was just like, whoa. Yeah. It really is the end of the quick 15-game Isaiah Thomas era in Cleveland. So I guess I'll start with that. So Cleveland made three trades, really three big trades. They traded Isaiah Thomas and Channing Frye, as well as their 2018 first-round pick, their own 2018 first-round pick, so it'll probably end up somewhere in the 20s based on where Cleveland finishes this season. Cleveland got in return Jordan Clarkson and Larry Nance from the Lakers. Then they also made a trade for Rodney Hood in a 3-team deal. They got Rodney Hood and George Hill from Sacramento. The Jazz got Jay Crowder and Derrick Rose from Cleveland, and the Kings got Joe Johnson from Utah and a 2020 second-round pick. And they also got Iman Shumpert from Cleveland. Then, to top it off, the best friends were separated, Dwayne Wade and LeBron, as Dwayne Wade was traded back to his old stomping grounds of Miami, where he probably will end up retiring as a member of the Heat. He got traded to Miami from Cleveland for a lightly protected future second-round pick. So, Anthony, what do you think about these three trades?
Well, I think the main thing that you could get from it, everything that happened in the last month with the Cavs since basically Christmas, I would say month and change, it was pretty clear that this team was not going to work. And it's funny because we had talked about this at the beginning of the season. We had both said that this mix of players was not going to work. It was just a really weird mix of players. And obviously they saw that clear. The Isaiah Thomas situation is a tough one because it was clear that he wasn't 100%, and that sucks for him. But at the same time, with all of the stuff that was going on in the locker room and team meetings and Isaiah speaking out so much, man, it was just such an untenable situation that it ended up turning out to be. So Cleveland had to do something. And also they're in the whole LeBron is a free agent and would not commit to them. And they also wanted to try and get better. And then, of course, all the talk about the Brooklyn pick beforehand was on the table. So we didn't really know what exactly was going to happen, but it was pretty clear that something was going to happen. Of all the scenarios that I would have envisioned, this is the one that's pretty much most shocking in the sense that they were able to do all of this without trading the Brooklyn pick. They traded their own pick. So if you look at the team now, this is the ultimate, like Brian Windhorst had said earlier today, this is the ultimate hedging between keeping yourself possibly talented and good for the future beyond LeBron, and also restacking the deck for the time left on this season, at least giving themselves a chance to be better defensively, which was clearly the problem. Because, I mean, think about last night where they played Minnesota and the game's in the 130s, and it's just, they just could not guard anybody. And Isaiah was a big part of that, but even, they just had a bunch of older players and guys didn't like each other, and there was just issues there. So the Cavs got younger. They got all the malcontents off the team, which is amazing in itself. Derrick Rose gone. Jay Crowder, who they said that has had issues with the locker room, he's gone. Isaiah, obviously, who's spoken out so much to the media about their struggles. And they were able to get all of those guys off the team. Iman Shumpert, too, was another one who, while he was injured and didn't play, he would always hear stuff about him not being happy about playing time and whatnot. So for the Cavs to make all of these deals and all of this maneuvering, and Kobe Altman really went to the trade machine on this one. He did a pretty good job considering the circumstances, because they were in a really difficult spot.
I agree. They were really in a difficult spot, and I think there needed to be some kind of changes, not even based on, who was coming in, but that roster was so dysfunctional, and Isaiah was just so crazy. Well, I don't want to even say crazy because that's unfair, but it was just so weird to see him say all of these things that, as a player who hasn't won, anything of significance for the Cavs, or is just coming there in his first year, the hip surgery, because he kept criticizing things that he wasn't really contributing to. We all know that he can't guard anybody because of his limitations.
Yeah.
But it also really spoke to, even though it really sort of became funny, like I saw a Network's tweet about the broken hand, where I thought was really funny that Isaiah Thomas would question him about the broken hand based off of what he had, what had happened, with Kevin Love being sick. But even though there were a lot of jokes that came with the whole calling out Kevin Love because he was sick, it didn't sound good. It just sounded like this guy doesn't really get, like, that you have teammates and you can't say things like that to the media because it makes everyone look bad. And he's also not in a place to speak, and he had no high ground to stand on. So I that always sort of was something that I was just like, this guy's digging his grave every time he speaks to the media.
Right, and it's just crazy to think about where the Cavs are now. They really, literally just turned over their whole roster again.
Yeah, dramatically.
What is this team going to look like with, less than half of the season left? We get towards the All-Star break, and they're going to have to try and put it together really quickly on the fly before the postseason. And now on court in terms of what he wants to do in free agency. What did you think of from a Cavs perspective? The idea of having to make some type of trade, considering everything that's been happening with LeBron, obviously that story in The Athletic by Jason Lloyd, and all the issues with Dan Gilbert and the front office and not speaking to each other, and the Cavs pretty clearly have changed their stance on getting LeBron involved in moves and stuff like that. How did you feel about now with this move happening, like, here and their future?
Well, it does show that there is some kind of sense of commitment to keeping him because they're taking on long-term salary. And even someone like Rodney Hood, even though his contract expires, he's still a restricted free agent. You would think that the Cavs would want to keep him if they're trading for him. So I feel like it shows LeBron that they're committed. But at the same time, I mean, they were committed 7 years ago. So I don't think that really changes necessarily what he wants to do or changes his feelings about his free agency. I think that still at the end of the day, if he feels like this team is not built to contend with Golden State, or like he wants to have the best chance to win and he wants to put the pressure on the Cavaliers. So while I do think that this shows that they're not just making moves to prepare for him leaving, and then he's committed to himself and his family, and so he's gonna make decisions based on that. And that's personally like how I feel like he would probably. That's just how he's always gonna go about it. But it is a step in the right direction.
Right. Yeah. It's everything that happened with that trade today. But also, like, I guess we could look at the other teams here. Utah, it was pretty clear that they didn't feel comfortable probably paying Rodney Hood in the offseason. Well, what do you think about, from Utah's standpoint, what they did and what their outlook is?
In Boston, he cut because he really did nothing and contributed nothing to Cleveland.
Yeah.
And I think some of that has to do with the fact that he wasn't really getting the ball or doing anything. And it's not that Jay Crowder needs the ball to be effective, but you need to at least be involved so that you feel like you're providing some kind of use, and that might boost your effort in other areas on the court. So I think it's a good move for the Jazz. He's still on a really friendly contract from the one he signed in Boston, and Utah's trying to make a playoff push. So I guess it'll work out. Derrick Rose, I'm interested to see like if he actually gets signed by anybody, because I personally feel like he's not that good anymore. And while he can still score and he can get to the bucket, he really provides nothing else. And when he's shown he doesn't really work out as a secondary option or a further behind chart in terms of what his role is. Unless he's the best player or best offensive player, it really makes no sense to have him. I mean, a lot of people were making jokes about the whole Thibodeau thing. Like, Minnesota is the team that is rumored to be interested in him when he is released by Utah because of his relationship with Thibodeau. Obviously, Jimmy Butler's there, Taj Gibson, so it's like the old Bulls all over again. But
Yeah.
I can't see it working there in Minnesota either, and I'm wondering when he's gonna be out of the league. What do you think about Derrick Rose's situation?
Well, that's what's interesting is like they already have issues with their bench in terms of guys like Jamal Crawford and Tyus Jones, Muhammad. They've had struggles with their bench already. I don't think adding Derrick Rose to the mix is going to make that better. So I don't think they should do it. But Tibbs is following the Doc Rivers plan of adding all of his former players. So I mean, hopefully the Wolves don't do it, because I think that could be one of those things that you have to consider from not only basketball but from a chemistry standpoint. Rose has had a weird couple of seasons with the Knicks and the Cavs, so I don't think that would be the greatest idea. And you're right. I'm not sure if Rose may be done. I mean, if this doesn't happen with the T-Wolves and another chance, it's like you almost wonder if he'll be out of the league after this season, to your point.
Well, after a few teams, it's going to be really hard for anybody else to really be interested. I think this has to be his last chance, based on this being a familiar coach and where Derrick Rose had his most success. So this really does feel like it's his last chance or his final stand as an NBA player. So the third trade also was the Dwayne Wade do we want to talk about the Kings? I'm like, should we even talk about it?
I mean, the Kings, who I just see Papagiannis got waived.
Oh wow, that's
now.
a first round pick just not that long ago.
2016. So that's just that's crazy. And then of course now they got Iman Shumpert.
Yeah.
Feels going to Sacramento. That's funny.
Well, he'll definitely get a chance to play. Well, actually, I can't guarantee that, but yeah, I think it is really crazy, and Joe Johnson is clearly going to be bought out. He was asking the Jazz for a trade or a buyout if they weren't going to be competitive for a playoff spot. So he's definitely going to be one of the big buyout market players that teams are going to go after. So that'll be really interesting. And I think that's crazy that Papagiannis got waived just 2 years after being drafted, or less than 2 years. And he wasn't really given a chance. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's how the NBA works sometimes, especially with poor management like the Sacramento Kings. So I guess we'll move to the third trade, the Dwayne Wade. I would actually say he played pretty decent with Cleveland. I don't know his stats, but I felt like he wasn't like terrible. But still, I think it ran its course. He doesn't really fit with that team. And he was traded back to Miami with the Cavaliers getting a lightly protected future second-round pick. So do you see Wade and Miami fitting together? And what do you think about his run in Cleveland?
Well, as far as his run in Cleveland is concerned, I would say after the first 10 games or so where he really struggled and he moved himself to the bench, I think he really did a good job of anchoring the second unit, being a playmaker, even in spots being a good defender at times. Obviously, not great transition defense-wise, which is a given with Wade considering his age. But I thought he played much better throughout his time after that initial start. Now, him going back to Miami is interesting because part of the problem that they had with him before he left was from Goran Dragic, and every metric would tell you that Dwayne Wade's numbers on court were, more negative than what obviously Goran Dragic was doing. And then the Heat's guard rotation with Josh Richardson playing so well this season, and obviously Wayne Ellington being very valuable from a spacing standpoint. I just don't know if Wade at this point in his career can he adjust to coming off the bench in the same type of role. Now, it could be a situation where in spots he'll be much better for their second unit and could provide some more scoring, because the Heat are one of the worst offenses in the league from a metric standpoint. So he may be able to help them, off the bench, but I definitely don't think he should be a part of their five down the stretch of games. And that's the thing, he may be because of his clout and his history with that franchise. So that remains to be seen how exactly that's going to work out. But I think from a chemistry standpoint, if you just talk about an emotional lift, the Heat have struggled lately. They've lost 5 in a row. Obviously, Dion Waiters is out for the season. They've had some tough losses. I think the schedule has kind of corrected a lot of the issues that they've gotten away with to this point. So maybe this will provide a boost, expected as he should be. So maybe from a chemistry standpoint, this may be a better fit.
A lot of the guys that were on the team are still there from when he first went to Chicago. So it probably should help in that area. But I agree with you that he's sort of, at the ending point of his career, and it'd be hard to expect him to carry that anymore in his career. And I think that this type of team is the perfect fit in the sense that they have a lot of guys who they're relying on, like Dragic, James Johnson, and Josh Richardson and Whiteside. So I could see him closing games, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. And I don't know. It definitely makes Miami a little bit more interesting, just in terms of watching and seeing how he fits with such a young team. Because really, most of those guys are in their 20s. So
yeah.
Should be interesting. So there are other trades that happen. I guess we'll move on to the Knicks because I feel like they are the most talked about team over the past week because of injuries and trades that happen. So they made 2 trades in the past 2 days. They today during the deadline they traded Doug McDermott to Dallas in a 3-team trade that also involved Denver. They received Emmanuel Mudiay from the Nuggets. The Mavericks. The Nuggets got Devin Harris, and they got a 2018 second-round pick from the Knicks via the Clippers. So, Emmanuel Mudiay, he's playing with Frank Ntilikina. The Knicks are going through a lot. They just traded Willie Hernangomez as well to Charlotte for Johnny O'Bryant, who they are waived. And 2 second-round picks. Kristaps Porzingis just tore his ACL 2 days ago. They are in flux as their best player is down and probably will miss the first few months of next year at least. And it sort of resets where they expect to be this year and next year, because this year I think is pretty much sealed up now. That year without Porzingis for 3 months, the likelihood of them competing for a playoff spot is very, very unlikely.
They're in a lot of trouble. That Porzingis injury was a franchise-altering injury. In terms of projections, in terms of everything that you may see from them going forward. And I don't know if Scott Perry and Steve Mills are the guys that I want to be trusting to try and get this ship right, or even make the right moves to kind of hold water until the Porzingis situation is figured out. Now, Porzingis is going to be, I think, a restricted free agent after next season. Yeah, the next season, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, next year will be his fourth year.
He's up for an extension.
Now they have to manage that issue. He's going to be coming off of the ACL injury probably at this same time next season. So you're going to get 30 plus games to figure out exactly whether any negotiations with him for his contract will change. And then you have to wonder about his health. A guy of his size and his build now has had nagging injuries for the first 3 years of his career, and now the big injury, the one that everybody's been kind of concerned about, for a guy like him, he's now had it. The question is, can he recover? Obviously, he's young enough that he can recover, but it really puts the Knicks in a bind in terms of what they do from a negotiating standpoint. And if Porzingis finds a way to eventually be that guy for the Knicks, if they alienate him in any type of way when it comes to negotiations and try to play hardball, it just makes everything comfortable. On top of that, when you want to talk about the Willie Hernangomez thing, see, my problem with what happened with the Knicks this season is, unfortunately, they've had this idea that they were competing for the playoffs when it never should have been that. And there's always been the discussion of, can you rebuild in New York? Can you rebuild in New York? Or you can't rebuild in New York. At some point, you have to cut bait. And this was another example today in the trade deadline, the fact that they didn't sell off Kyle O'Quinn or any of their other veterans that they could have sold off. And the person that they did trade was Hernangomez, who didn't even get a chance to show what kind of skills that he had coming into this season after an all rookie team season last year. And I know they got Cantor, and I know that's a big part of it. Look, I don't think Cantor's a part of their future. I don't think Kyle O'Quinn's a part of their future. Courtney Lee is not a part of their future. Lance Thomas, as nice of a role player that he could be, is not a part of their future either, because assuming that this team gets good at some point in the next 5 years, all those players are not going to be a part of it. So I think they should have done more due diligence in terms of trying to figure out what they could have gotten for all of those guys, and I think they could have probably gotten something for Courtney Lee at the very least. And the fact that they didn't do that, and the fact that they're starting Jared Jack still at this point in the season, all of that is a big problem. I don't think they know what they're doing. So if I believe that, and I feel that way, then I think there's a lot of concerns. And I think that Porzingis injury just threw a variable into the mix that cannot be accounted for at all. So, like, when I think of what the Knicks are going to do forward, I'm not sure, and I don't trust them. So I think they're in a lot of trouble.
Well, I think, like you brought up the contract situation. I mean, what's the chances that they offer him a full max extension in the fall, October, when that deadline comes right before the season starts? I feel like they probably will offer him the max extension even despite the ACL injury.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's the thing. And you know what? I never wanted to say this, and we've all,
I'm wondering where this is headed.
Different conversations about Porzingis, and we've always heard from other people about what they think about Porzingis, and they don't think he's a franchise player, and he's always hurt and stuff like that. I have thought this after a while, towards the middle of the season. I was really, and I know Phil Jackson was horrible in the way trying to trade him. But I thought about it. I thought about, man, if the Knicks are not going to get this right with Porzingis and everything that they're doing around him, which I think is the bigger issue, maybe they should have thought at that time about what they could have got for him on the open market. And they probably could have gotten a lot. So the fact that I thought of that makes me think a little bit less of him in terms of what I think his overall value to the franchise is going to be going forward. And that was before the injury. So now that he has this injury, I'm not sure what exactly they should do. Now, what I think they may try to do is try and get this extension done. But with the stuff that's happened with Porzingis' agent / brother, and everything that's going on with that, and some of the back and forth between the organization that hasn't been great in terms of communication, that could make things a little unclear to where we're going to be at going forward. So this is like, and that's why when the injury happened, I said, "Oh my gosh!" Just like I had been thinking about maybe they should do something with him, mainly because I just don't see them. And if you think about everything that they've done this year, from the way that they've managed the roster, with the gluttony of centers, with who they're playing on the court, the fact that they thought that they were in the playoff race when it was clear that their team is not good enough to make the playoffs.
Well, they were. They were 3 or 4 games over 500.
No, they were. But we've been doing this the last couple of seasons with them.
I know. I saw that they actually have the same record the past 3 years.
So like what I'm saying is, it's like, the worst part of it is, and I know teams have to think more positive and stuff like that in terms of like what they want to try and do in terms of remaining competitive. But if I know that they're not good, and I could see that even with the record being as good as they were, part of that was their home. Goes to show you that they don't get it, and they're not going to get it, because again, you see Forbes, the Knicks are the highest valued franchise. So there's no incentive ever to actually hunker down and make proper decisions and rebuild the right way. They're always going to do we want to get the flashy move or try and remain competitive, coaching for his job, so he's going to play veterans when there's no need to play veterans. They're going to screw up Frank Ntilikina for no reason, and now this whole Moutier situation kind of muddles the waters a little bit even more. Moutier has struggled in his first couple of seasons. I think he's the lowest ranked point guard in terms of RPM in the league. So I don't know. I would like to see him get more of a shot, and we'll see what happens. But you see, Frank's been skirted by Trey Burke a little bit, and then Jarrett Jack, of course. So now you add Moutier into the mix. Something's got to give. But it's like they're just, in general, they're just very frustrated because there are things that can be done to be better and put yourselves in position to be better, but I know that they're not going to do them.
So you're fed up. Well, I it's funny when you say that. I don't know, like, he's a really unique player, and I'm talking about Porzingis, that it's really hard to see them trading him. I know that, Phil almost traded him last year or during the summer last year, right before the draft. But I think especially with the way he's played this year, it'd really be hard to feel that way. Now, based off of other players' injury histories or the ACL history of, players getting injured, it leaves a lot to be desired in terms of them living up to what they had previously done on the court and their efficiency with Porzingis down the road. And it also really does sort of mess up the Knicks' future. So I do agree with you about that. I don't know about trading him. I won't go that far. But I understand that and I agree with you. There's like Frank Ntilikina is a really young guy. He's a very good defensive guard, and he has his growing pains on offense. And it's clear when you watch him play. He fouls too much. He turns the ball over a lot. But it's like they have to give him that opportunity, and the Knicks have been stuck in this idea that they have to be competitive and that they have to be competing for a playoff spot. And it's I think it's really messed up their direction even before the Porzingis injury, because Ntilikina has lost playing time, like you said, to Trey Burke, and just at this point of the season, you would want to give this guy the opportunity. And I understand that you don't want to just give someone minutes just because, but it's hard to understand the Knicks' thought process of trying to be competitive and at the same time putting out a point guard like Jarrett Jack, because I don't really think he makes them competitive. So it's a lot to think about, and I think with the Willie trade too, it really doesn't make sense, and Moutier's fit. Well, I do understand the Knicks trading for Moutier because I think he is a good buy low candidate in the sense that his stock is as low as it can be right now because he's a reserve. He's wildly inconsistent with the Nuggets, and he had lost his starting spot to Jamal Murray. I it makes you wonder what the team thinks about Ntilikina, because even though people are already saying, oh, they could play together, it's got to be your future point guard of the future, and then you sign someone from the G League who used to be a lottery pick, and then you trade for another former lottery pick point guard. It also doesn't send the right message too. It's sort of like you're replaceable, and we don't know what and this is all being done before we know what Ntilikina is. So he's not really being given an opportunity to play through mistakes and grow and develop as a player, and it's problematic because they only gave up Doug McDermott and a second round draft pick. It still is sort of a questionable move in terms of who you have on your roster. And also, it depletes their wing situation. They don't really have a lot of wings, and so it really puts them in a tough bind. So I guess we've talked a lot about the Knicks and their losing ways. They're definitely losing tonight. I mean, they have so many people out for tonight against the Raptors. So it's
Michael
over.
Beasley's taking all of the shots.
Yes, every single one. So let's see I'm looking at them like they're all such small trades. We talked about the Blake Griffin trade on the previous podcast, but they acquired Jameer Nelson from the Bulls. Have the right to swap 2022 second round picks. So I mean the Pistons are on a winning streak. They won 4 in a row since acquiring Blake. They are positioning themselves for a big playoff run. Do you think that this team with Blake is going to make the playoffs now?
Yes, I do think that they are. The schedule is kind of conducive to them doing that. At the expense of who, I'm not sure yet. It remains to be seen. We'll see what happens with Miami. They've struggled recently, as I alluded to earlier. Indiana's going to make it. I feel like they've been pretty consistent as long as Victor Oladipo is healthy. Washington has played better as of late. That whole John Wall situation is a whole nother story. So I think Detroit's going to make it, probably at the expense of either Miami or Philly, one of those two teams. And I feel like I personally think that Miami's going to be on the outside looking in. I've kind of felt that way for a while. We'll see what happens if and when Reggie Jackson comes back. We'll see if that messes up the chemistry at all. If not, we'll see if that happens. But so far, they've had a pretty good mix. Now, granted, they played most of these games at home, so that helps a little bit to get them going in the right direction. But hey, you still got to win the game. That'd be nice. It'll give them a chance to really compete in the first round.
So another trade, and yeah, I think that they have a really good shot. I'm not as sold. I'm not gonna guarantee it because I feel like they've played all these games at home against bad teams, mostly bad teams. So I will wait. Okay, so another trade. Orlando gave up on the Elfrid Payton experience and traded him to Phoenix for a 2018 second round pick. Is Elfrid Payton ever going to be a starting point guard in the NBA, or is he just a reserve for the rest of his life?
Well, it goes to show you that Orlando has now had to change course on
literally every lottery pick literally every lottery pick since Dwight left.
Yeah, and I mean, we even heard a couple of weeks ago that maybe the Aaron Gordon may have been had if somebody really wanted to pony up an offer for him. You know, as far as Elfrid Payton is concerned, the question that everybody has is, can he shoot? And
he shot better this year. He's shooting 37.5, but he doesn't shoot. But he doesn't shoot a lot, and teams don't respect his shots still. So.
Yeah, but that's the crazy part. The fact that moved him for a second rounder just goes to show you how willing they were to just sell low on him. And it's pretty clear that we're not going to get a lot for him. So that is an interesting move. And I guess we'll see what happens with Phoenix. They have a bunch of guards on the team. So I want to see at least on both sides of the ball. I know Booker's not the greatest defensively, but Peyton does have defensive chops. So it's still difficult, though, for Phoenix because it always feels like Phoenix is always in a situation where there are like kind of either tanking or they're just in their season. The games don't really matter, so
Yeah, like yesterday.
it's always so hard. It's always so hard to read in those types of situations, and that's what I would say about just tanking in general. When you are one of those teams that are always tanking, the games don't really mean much. So when the games don't mean much and everybody's kind of out for themselves, in a lot of ways, it's just a completely different environment, and you can't really tell exactly who's good or who's not good, or is it just because people are not trying? So,
And thinking about the trade now, back in 2014 when Elfrid Payton was drafted, the Orlando traded 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick to draft Elfrid Payton. They traded their 2015 or 2014 first rounder, which became Dario Saric. They traded a 2015 second rounder that became Willie Hernan Gomez, and they traded another first round pick that eventually went to Sacramento. In that when they traded for Marco Bellinelli and all that other stuff, or when they used the cap space to sign Costa Koufis and Marco Bellinelli. It ended up in Sacramento, but it became De'Aaron Fox. I think that'll be looked at as one of the single silliest trades of this, at least this current NBA. And yeah, so I agree with you. It's sort of messy. Orlando is just, especially with new management, they're trying to figure out who do they want to keep, who do they want to let go in the first year. And Elfrid Payton obviously Aaron Gordon too, like you said, was up for debate to see if anybody was going to get him, and nothing really happened necessarily. But it looks like there's a possibility he might not be in Orlando long term as he enters restricted free agency this summer. So I guess we'll just touch on a few things. So we didn't really talk about the Lakers side of the trade, and this will be more like salary cap based. So we'll talk about two teams who made really big salary cap moves and sort of got out of some awkward situations in terms of trying to figure out the money side of it. So the Lakers, we didn't talk about it. What do you think about where the Lakers are headed? Will they be able to get after their Paul George, LeBron James situation? Are you surprised that Cleveland was the team that helped them get to a goal that they were trying to reach?
I'm certainly surprised that they were able to do this, and I was surprised that it was Cleveland that was able to do this for them. And it's funny considering what they were saying the last couple of days about, we're going to kick the can down the road and we're going to be involved more into 2019 free agency as opposed to 2018 free agency. And then, of course, Paul George, as always, with his comments of, we hear this stuff about the brotherhood in Oklahoma City with Melo and Russ, but then you hear this stuff as like, I don't know if I'm going to LA or not, which nobody even, in that story, he wasn't even asked about LA. So, listen, man. I think that's been the story that's been reported this entire time, that Paul George is eventually going to go to the Lakers. And at this point, I don't see why that doesn't happen.
Wow.
Because as much as Paul George says he cares about winning and chemistry and being on a good team, has he proven that in this situation? In all of these situations in his career, because if he could have stayed in Indiana and been, and they would have been competitive, almost a similar record to what Oklahoma City has this year, which is funny enough when you think about it. From a Lakers perspective, they're in position to do something. Now, that remains to be seen. What's going to happen with LeBron and whether we do get the dream scenario of LeBron and Paul George and then anybody who comes after that. But what's interesting about everything else for the Lakers is what happens if they don't get those guys? What are they going to do? Are they going to pull a 2010 Knicks and fill up the roster in other ways that are not going to be good long term for the franchise? I don't know. That's going to be something that Magic Johnson is really going to have to decide, and we're going to find out if he's a good executive. We're going to find out almost immediately, because if he doesn't get those guys to come there, what's he going to do? And Will he be short-sighted? Will he be quick to try and make a splash signing? Or will he have the patience to try and figure things out and be in it for the long haul? So all of that remains to be seen. And where does Lonzo Ball and the whole Ball situation fit into this? I always think that's still going to be a fascinating thing because I don't think that LeVar stuff anytime soon. It's only quiet now because Lonzo's not playing. So once he gets back to playing, and then even going into next year, I have a feeling that's going to be a situation again. So at the very least, they put themselves in the game and they announced themselves as, okay, we're in the game for 2018 free agency. So that's going to be interesting to watch whether they have a shot to get those guys. I know they have been trying to trade Clarkson for a while, and they weren't able to get rid of Deng. They weren't able to get rid of Randall like they wanted to. But, at least for the time being, they put themselves in position to now see if they could get a big fish.
A big fish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to see what they do. I don't know what's going to happen, but I lean towards no. I just feel like they've been trying to do this whole free agency thing, and I just don't think that this is the way that it works anymore. You have to at least show teams that you are serious about putting a winning product out on the floor. And while the Lakers have made big gains this year, their defense has really stepped up under Luke Walton, and they have a really nice young core of guys. Part of me just feels like you got to win. You can't be this, sub 500 team every year. And I think that the Lakers have nothing to stand on with that. And they're really just hoping that they can just sign whatever free agent every year. And that's the difference. When, in my opinion, when they signed Shaq in 1996, they were a good team. I mean, that was just the way it was. They had been a playoff team 2 years in a row, I think. They had won 50 games that year, the year I think Magic Johnson came back from his retirement. They were a good team. They weren't a great team, obviously. They weren't competing for championships necessarily, but they were a very good basketball team. They had pieces in place that made Shaq say, hey, Eddie Jones, Nick Van Exel, borderline all-stars, good players. The Lakers don't have any borderline all-stars even. I mean, Brandon Ingram has shown promise, and he looks like he could one day be a 20-point scorer. Kyle Kuzma has shown that he is a very good player offensively. And Lonzo Ball has also shown that he's a very solid all-around player, very capable. But just being solid is not good enough. They need to have guys who are at least... they got to be close to being an all-star. They can't have guys who... you're saying, oh, they're 3 or 4 years away. And I think that's the problem that the Lakers are going to face no matter how much cap space they've created. They have to put a winning product on the floor. No matter if they get Paul George, LeBron, whatever. They have to put a winning product on the floor so that they can really go after the real superstars. Because as we've seen, most of the big free agents have gone to teams that are already winning recently. From Kevin Durant going to Golden State to LaMarcus Aldridge going to San Antonio. The only one recently is LeBron, and it's just because he wanted to go back home and, accomplish some special stuff. So, we'll see. The other team I was thinking about in terms of the cap, the Blazers, they traded Noah Vonleh to the Chicago Bulls for a player internationally. I don't know if I can pronounce his name. Milovan Rakovic. They traded Noah Vonleh in cash and put them under the luxury tax. They have made that first step in trying to get under the luxury tax when they traded Allen Crabbe. I think it's pretty good. They didn't have to trade a first rounder at all to get under the luxury tax from last summer, which they were prepared or almost near approaching. So they're in a weird position. I remember when we talked and did our trade deadline trades we wanted to see. You had put CJ McCollum and said it wasn't going to work. What do you think about the future of the Blazers?
Well, that's another one. I think Nurkic, with his free agency, are they going to commit to him? Because if they do commit to him, they're still in that same spot where they're committed to 3 players making a lot of money. And it's pretty clear that those 3 players together are not a championship core. My contention is always going to be, if I'm them, I trade CJ, get what I can for him, and try and rebuild around Lillard as quickly as possible before his next free agency. And I feel like that's what they need to do. They're not good enough. I think they should know that they're not good enough. I, I'm pretty sure that Damian Lillard probably knows that they're not good enough too. So I would have to think that this is not the only thing that they do. That more's on the way. It's just so difficult in the landscape of the league now, where a lot of the teams don't have a lot of flexibility coming into this offseason. And now teams are becoming really gun shy of trades. Like, if you really think about, besides what the Cavs did today, if you look around the league, you heard that a lot of teams just didn't want to get into the trade market because of picks and very afraid of giving up first rounders. So what would a guy like CJ McCollum command on the open market if he was ever to be traded? That's an interesting question. So all of that considered, and when you don't have a lot of assets like Portland does at this point, it's just very difficult. So that's why I feel like CJ is the candidate to me if they want to make a non-lateral move and trying to get better at some point, because their ceiling is what, like a 6, 7, 8 seed in the Western Conference to get bounced in the first round. I mean, that's really what it is when it comes down to it.
True. True.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the final part will be the people who didn't do anything at the deadline. Do you think that, and obviously the buyout market is expected to be booming, but
Yeah.
did you think that anyone missed out an opportunity to either offload a dead salary they didn't want, that would really help them in the stretch run of the season? Do you think that there was any missed opportunities?
You know what's funny? Probably not as much as I would have thought a couple of days ago, because I think originally when all we heard was that DeAndre Jordan and Lou Williams were going to get moved after the Blake Griffin trade. Initially, you think, okay, that's going to happen. But then you look at what has to happen when you trade expirings these days, and if they were going to trade DeAndre, then they would have to take back extra money, which probably on this year, which I'm sure they didn't want to do. So in a lot of ways, they were almost better. They're almost better in the situation that they're in if they re-sign him, which I don't know they're going to do. I don't think they're going to offer him a max. I think he walks, and I think they're probably going to be comfortable in letting him walk, which is very interesting to think of when them and the Mavericks were fighting over him 3 years ago. I just find it amazing that we're in a different space now where the value of guys has changed in the league. So I guess you could say Oklahoma City could have done something. I would have been really interested if Oklahoma City got in on Courtney Lee after losing Andre Robertson.
This is the NBA Trades Podcast. You can check out Anthony on Twitter at ACSpotlight95, and also check out his book.
Please send a review on Amazon. It always helps. Appreciate y'all for getting it. Appreciate y'all for reviewing. And then, of course, the podcast Marvel Cinematic University, where me and my guys, Jerome Chang and Jake Christie, review all of the movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We just recorded an episode today on Iron Man 2. That should be out on Friday. So looking forward to you guys listening to that, and check us out on that medium and send us a review there. And should also plug my brother Raphael's story. The host of NBA Trades did a story on the Gasol brothers anniversary, the 10-year anniversary. It's a very good story, well done on Bleacher Report. Check it out there. And
You're
that's
promoting.
what I have. Thanks for having me. Always fun doing this with you.
You're promoting a story I did on my own podcast. There's something funny about that. Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate it. The kind words. This is the NBA Trades Podcast. You can subscribe. NBA Trades Podcast are on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube. Yeah, I don't know. It's all over the place. And then you can also follow the NBA_trades on Twitter, NBA Trades on Facebook. We out here. So check it out, and peace.